So let's talk aftermarket options. And I always, I always prove myself wrong when I first got this car. I'm like, you know, other than certainly needing an exhaust, I'm like, I really don't feel like I need anything in this car. It's low enough and it's fine stock and it's got plenty of power. And now that I have it modified, I couldn't imagine driving it stock. It was very similar to when I got my E92. I'm like, this thing is fantastic. And then when I took it when I put it back to stock, took all the parts off of it, and suspension, wheels, tires, exhaust, the whole thing. When I put it back to stock and took it back to trade in on my Carrera S, I'm like, man, this thing sucks. So I'm sure I feel the same about this car now with the modifications that I've done. I would probably hate it stock. But you know, my thought process. And I've been a little limited because this is the first time in my life that I've got a sort of brand new first, you know, have one of the first couple of hundred cars that sort of come into the country. So I had bought the car before the aftermarket support had really sort of taken off. So some of the options I might have done a little bit differently, and I'm going to take you through what my thought process that was there and what I have chosen and why, and what I've put on the car and taken off the car. I haven't been as indecisive with this car as I was with the GT3. But the nice thing about the M3 is there's such huge aftermarket support, and there's so much sharing that goes on in the Bimmer Post world, the forum world, that it's a lot easier to figure things out. And you know, I've had to pioneer some things and buy it first, but there's a clear path for me, and the ultimate goal on all of this stuff, after learning through the years of screwing things up and having cars broken down, and I've never really done anything crazy, but I'm more of a bolt-on, factory-like modification kind of guy. So I want stuff that's going to work like factory. And not have major issues. And still, you know, I've had a few little minor tweaks I've needed to make on this car, just like I have with any other aftermarket part. But the vast majority of the stuff I have in the car, this is my car that I want to drive every day, and this is the car that I want to be comfortable. And despite my innate desire to make it wild and crazy and 700 horsepower, I'm sort of remind myself of how frustrated I get when things don't work. So let me take you through that thought process here. So step one was cosmetic upgrades. We do the fender side vents. Normally right here, you can probably see the color difference, is an amber factory reflector, and so I have an IND painted. And depending on what angle you look at, it certainly doesn't match, but to me it looks better than amber. I actually think IND, because they're like, those guys are all about quality. I really respect them. I think they've actually stopped making or stopped offering mineral white because it really doesn't match to their standards. It's just impossible unless you spray the whole car at the same time. It's with a three-stage paint, it's nearly impossible to match. So I'm okay with it. I think it looks okay. I like it much better than I would if I had amber side markers. It kind of stinks in the U.S. You know, you Europeans that watch these videos are like, what the heck are you talking about? In the U.S., some idiot decided we needed to have amber side markers on every car that passes our borders. So it's just something we have to deal with. You also have to have rear reflectors as well, which I covered those up. So we got the side vent and gloss black. Now, IND is kind of the company that most people buy stuff from for cosmetic and actually a lot of just aftermarket support. They sell a painted version of the side vent or fake side vent things. I don't think these things actually vent through to the brakes. Maybe they do. I don't know. I forget if they do. I forget if these actually were the first ones that actually do something. I think they do. Yeah, I can see my finger. So there is some venting here versus the other cars, which is just cosmetic. but gloss black to match the gloss black wheels, and then I just left the actual holes with factory. So this normally comes in chrome, and I replaced that with black. Same thing with the front grille. So we would call it grills and gills. So the front grille is gloss black. It's kind of hard to see because of the way the lighting is in here. And I did these all at once. I just had PSI do it. Normally I would do this stuff myself. It's super easy to do, but I didn't want to do the suspension myself, so I let the guys at PSI do it all for me. And then in the rear of the car, and I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but in the rear of the car, there is a reflector, factory reflector that goes here. So again, it's sort of a rough match, but on the rear of the car, I have those reflectors covered up as well. Not imperative that you do that, I don't think, but works. So every BMW, I'm surprised that BMW is with some of their individual department and all the different options that they've come out with over the years. I'm surprised that they haven't caught on. I'm sure the aftermarket community is glad that they haven't, but why wouldn't they? They do black accents everywhere else. Why wouldn't they make black grills? I'm sure there's a reasoning behind that. The nostalgia of the chrome grills and the fact that that's been a BMW standard forever. But I've replaced all that cosmetic stuff. There really isn't any other cosmetic thing that I've done or that I plan to do. You can do some stuff to the interior as well, which I just don't care about that. One of my buddies, my new buddies from this whole sharing experience, he does all kinds of cool stuff to the interior, and it always intrigues me. I just never actually pull the trigger. Like for instance, to do like an Alcantara boot and matching e-brake, or to do some different shift knobs, stuff like that. Maybe someday if I get bored, I'll do that, but I haven't really messed with any of those other cosmetic options. So on the car, suspension-wise, is the KW sleeve kit. So you have the factory shock, in the front, and then there's a factory perch, and then there's the factory spring. And then, of course, the shock is the thing that has the adjustability of the adaptive or electronic damping control, EDC. So when you change the button there, it changes changes how much liquid can pass through the center of the. These aren't magnetic. So basically, from what I understand, there's a valve with like a flat end on it, and you can kind of turns and lets a certain amount of oil or hydraulic fluid pass to either stiffen or soften the suspension. So what I wanted was a simple sleeve kit. Dynon has an option, which in my opinion, the KW, if as fast as they came out with the sleeve kit, they're just cranking it out. So I doubt there's much testing that goes into it other than just the simplicity of, let's give us some springs, let's use our experience, let's give us a new spring perch with a sleeved collar on it, and then we can adjust the ride height. So I have the KW kit because the Dynon wasn't available, plus it's cheaper, it's like $700. I had PSI do it. It's kind of a pain in the butt to lower this car. I think the rear is pretty easy to do, the front is a little bit harder. But they did it for me, and I haven't aligned the car, which I know some of you are gasping for air right now. I haven't seen the need to align it. I think drive straight as an arrow. I'm sure camber's off a little, but the car I'm lowered maybe 3/4 of an inch in the front, maybe an inch, and like 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch in the rear. It really hasn't warranted me. The camber looks good to me, and I just haven't gone to get it aligned. I haven't noticed any odd tire wear. I've had 8,000 miles on this suspension, so the car is lowered and this is the lowest it goes with the KW suspension, which is low enough for me because the front bumper's 3.5 inches off the ground anyway, so I really wouldn't want to go much lower. And then I have 15 plus 15 millimeter spacers in the front and rear. And I wrote it saying you need to do 15 and 12. And Sean didn't listen to me, and he said he ordered 15, I think because the 12s are on back order or something. He just threw them on there, and I'm glad because I think it needs 15. I hate poke. I hate it when tires poke out, but the 15 is solid. I think it's a good good for the rear, and certainly on the M4, on the M3 as well. So 15 millimeter spacers. I haven't noticed any wobble or any shake. These spacers are from Turner. You can get them from Matt Schnell. You know, pretty much H&R, pretty much any of the companies should be fine. When my next step is, I've got wheels coming. I actually had ordered wheels. Clausen is a company I have a relationship with. The guy who owns for Clausen is awesome. His name's Frank. He created a sort of new wheel design, and part of the reason why I decided I wasn't going to do wheels, I had M52Rs on my E92, but those were cast wheels. The factory wheels were cast. These are forged, so these wheels are much lighter. They're actually lighter than the M52R. So what I didn't want to do is spend a bunch of money on wheels and then have it weigh more. And I know we're talking minimal differences here, but I know that I'm going to do bigger tires, so I don't want to have heavier wheels, heavier tires, and I know I have 400 something wheel horsepower, but still, it just seemed like a waste to me to spend money and have the wheels be heavier than the wheel and tire combo be heavier than stock. So Frank created a new design, 18 in the front, 20 and change pounds in the rear, which will help offset the fact that the tires are going to be wider and heavier. I'm going to do Advan 808Rs. Made the wheels, had them finished, had them the lettering paint matched to the gold calipers, and they didn't clear the front, so the barrels were a little different. So Frank redesigned the barrels, and I should have wheels here in the next month or so, a couple of weeks, something like that, assuming they clear the carbon ceramics. So they're going to be Clausen MSO3s. They'll be 18, like I said, 18 and change pounds in the front, 20 and change pounds in the rear. I'm going to go from a 255, 275 combo to a 265, 305 combo in the rear. And I know I'm losing the factory stagger, but having some meat in the rear to me is a little bit more important. And what I'll probably do, depending on how it works, how well it hooks up, I might actually do. Dynon has something to replace the swing arms in the rear to help. The factory ones are designed to flex, but when we're making more horsepower and you have bigger wheels, Dynon makes different control arms in order to take some of that flex out. They're a lot more expensive on this car, because I think you need four different connections, or there's four bars that you need to replace out. So I'll probably do that too. So that's what's going to happen with the wheel, tire, suspension. I'm going to leave the KW on. If I now were to buy, like say we'd get rid of this car and get another one, I would probably do the Dynon sleeve over system. I just feel like my guess is they would tune it. They tune it a little bit more. Maybe I'm naive in believing that, but was it worth 3 times the price? Probably not. But I know they do a lot of research with bump stops and suspension travel, and the KW, they're not doing squat. They're just cranking it out. Mechanically, it works, and it seems like I have no chatter, have no issues. It works great, so there's no complaints there. I just feel like if I would probably want to do the whole Dynon suspension option, sway bars, Dynon suspension, and I probably, again, I won't mess with this car, but if let's say I replace this and go with a second or third iteration of this F80, then I would probably just swap it out and do the full Dynon suspension with sway bars and all that stuff. Again, if you're not going to the track, what does it really matter? To me, it's more of the fun of it than anything. So that's the thought process on suspension. Wheels are coming. I think they're going to be really awesome. I'm doing satin black instead of, I was going to do brushed double dark before, but now I'm doing satin black. Next option I'll talk about is the rear. I don't know why I never did this on the E92. I think it's a really cool option. This is M Performance rear trunk Decklid spoiler. I did this right from the get, and as soon as I got the car, I dropped it off and had Sean at PSI and David at PSI put it on for me in Orlando. I'm sure I could have done it myself, super easy. Just pull the other one off and put this one on, and it kind of fits in a certain spot. Carbon fiber, I like the subtlety of it, sort of coming off the roof, and then you have the little carbon fiber lip thing here. I'm sure it doesn't do much for aerodynamics, but it looks cool. It's a couple $100, and you know, to me, it's in my opinion, I think that modifications should be subtle, and I don't like big changes. So it's just the subtle little change that sort of matches or carries on with the theme of the car. I actually don't, and I've been back and forth on this 100 times. They make a rear splitter. A lot of companies do. Rkp does, and there's a dozen other companies that do it. I like the factory look. I think it breaks it up too much. So I've decided I'm going to leave that alone, and just sort of leave it as it is. Maybe I can get this camera over here so you can see what the heck I'm talking about. But basically, the splitter down by the exhaust area of the car is where you would replace that little factory piece. It takes 2 seconds. A lot of people love changing that. Just to me, I have better things to do with my $1,100 or whatever that thing costs, $800, depending on which company you choose. So yeah, I don't want to open the door, but it's down here next to the exhaust. I have a Dynon plate frame. I normally don't like branded frames, but this one looks nice. It's a Dynon. I had the IND painted version. I actually have a new plate coming. I had the Dynon, or I'm sorry, the IND painted version. For some reason the gloss black just didn't work for me. Sorry about the angle, guys, but the garage door's closed and it's like 1,000 degrees outside. So I've switched to the Dynon. The Dynon is like a brushed sort of black, matte black or flat black. Not matte, but a flat sort of finish. And then I just, the bolts, I didn't use their caps, but the bolts, I just did just got a paint marker and painted those so they kind of match rather than putting a big giant plastic cap on there. And again, I normally don't like plate frames, but this is subtle enough that it just looks unfinished without the frame. And I don't like the letters getting all covered up, it looks weird. So I had a plate that I call it a douche plate, but it was something I always thought I wanted, and I got it, and it had to do with where I work and what I do for a living. And maybe you guys have seen some of the pictures of it, but I got rid of that one, and I've got a new one coming that says Turbo i6, so it'll be TURBO space i6, which isn't all that creative, but just something different, I guess, than just the traditional regular plate. I've been on this kick lately of doing personalized plates. I love my plate on my GT3 9K flat 6. I thought that was really cool. Real proud of myself for that one. My buddy came up with the idea of putting NA flat 6. And I said, the last thing they said, well, what about 9K flat 6 when I was standing in line? So that's what I've done. So that'll be here in a month or so. I don't know how long it'll take. One of the other options, the aftermarket mods that I always do. One of my favorite things to do to a car is an exhaust. I know I'm not kind of at a weird angle here. It'd be better if I showed you from the rear of the car, but part of my, and I'm going to do a review on the car, but part of my problem with this car and why I don't love this car is it sounds retarded. Excuse the expression. It doesn't sound bad. It doesn't sound good. It just sounds weird. It sounds very digital, very artificial, especially with the active sound in the car. But I have another sort of one of the modifications I have inside the car. I have a CAN bus from N54 Tuning. I guess BMS makes it and N54 Tuning sells it. Whatever. The CAN bus allows me to use the turn signal stock in order to adjust the valves and the exhaust. But what I started with, I knew immediately I wanted to get rid of the exhaust, and I was waiting, and there really weren't any out. The only one the one that came out first was the Rkp, and by the way, I think that's how I want to say Akrapovich, but I think it's Akrapovich is how you pronounce it. I've never really been a fan of the titanium exhaust, and I had one on my E92 and had one on my S2000. They tend to sound tinny and thin to me, you know. Titanium has a different resonant frequency than stainless steel. So I lowballed some guy, you know, he'd bought the Acra exhaust, and you know, I didn't want to be a jerk. I said, look, man, you can tell me to get lost if you think I'm an idiot, but you know, the exhaust is like $6,800, a ridiculous amount of money, and I offered him $5,000 because I knew that if I bought it for $5,000 that I wouldn't lose my shirt on it. I could sell it when I was done with it. And I got the exhaust, and I actually really liked it. On this car, it really worked pretty well, as you know, as good as this car can sound anyway. And so I had the Acra, and I was done, and I've decided I'm not doing downpipes on this car because, to me, in my opinion, downpipes make it sound even worse than it already does. And so I'd love to have the extra 15, 20 horsepower, but I'm just not interested in having a buzzy, you know, farty car. It already does that enough. So I had the Acra, and it was good to go. And then, because it was really the only exhaust that was available, Acra and Remus, then the MPE, M Performance came out, and then Active Auto Works had an exhaust that looked interesting to me. Of course, I was interested in what Dynan was going to do. Dynan ended up coming up with only an axle back, so you have to cut the exhaust. I wasn't interested in that. And then sort of shortly after the MPE, shortly after the Acra, the AWE got in the game. And of course, as many of you, I had no idea AWE was getting in the game, BMW game. So I forget how it transpired, but they, you know, I think one of them sent me an email because I had been doing the journals. I think it was Jesse or Mike or somebody said, hey, you know, would you be interested in having our exhaust? And at first I'm like, you know, what does that even mean? I don't really want to buy another exhaust. But then I started thinking, well, maybe I can get a discount, and I could sell my Acra. I'm not in one dire love with the Acra. I thought it looked good. Thought it sounded okay, you know, pretty decent for, you know, at least over stock. And you know, I always wanted to have one. So at first I was sort of thinking, well, yeah, you know, let's talk about it. I'm interested. And then when they sort of came out with the design, having 3-inch piping all the way back, knowing, you know, I've had an AWE, my B8S4 on my 991 C2S, and I love those exhausts. I just sort of had a hunch that I would really like what they came up with, and sure enough, the roughly $4,000, $3,800 AWE exhaust, in my opinion, sounds significantly better than the Acra. The Acra still sounds great. It has a little bit different sound to it, but there was a difference between the two. They actually sounded much more similar than you would expect. But the AWE with the 3-inch piping all the way back, it just sounds good. I mean, it makes this car sound, I think, as good as it's going to get. So I have the non-resonated version, which means there's no resonators in the mid-pipe. So you have secondary cat delete. And the nice thing about this car is almost like BMW knew that they didn't screw us this time. They left the cats in the exhaust devoid of O2 sensors. So you just take the exhaust off and put the AWE version in. So it's a mid section. You know, there's several sections to it, and then it turns at like a 45 and then goes to the back. So I combine that with the BMS can flap, and I get adjustability of the exhaust. And when I start it up, I'll close the valves because it gets kind of loud and annoying. And also it sounds real tinny and farty and raspy. Until the car warms up, and then when the cold start goes away, then I'll open the valves, and I drive around with the valves open all the time. I just hate switching valves that open and close on their own. It's just one of my pet peeves. I don't like that. I don't like it. It's sort of opening up as you get on the throttle. I don't want that. This car does not drone at all anyway, so there's not really any reason for me to have the valves closed. I don't lose any power or anything like that. So I drive around with the valves open all the time. And it does sound cool. I mean, it sounds good. I think the car sounds okay at low RPMs if you kind of lightly rev on the car. But as soon as you get up into the higher RPMs, it gets farty, and it's my main disappointment with this car. And if my guess is if you like that, you probably have never had a good sounding car, and you just don't know any better, because if you compare it to any other car that sounds good, there's in my world there's a few dozen cars that sound great. This is not one of them. It's just weird, and it's almost sometimes embarrasses me. So I don't get on the car as much as I probably should, because the overrun or the fart boost is something that drives me freaking crazy. So I don't want to amplify that by doing downpipes and making it sound even tinnier and fartier. So you can tell I'm a little disappointed in the way the car sounds. I know some people love it, which is just perplexing to me. But it's what we have to deal with. BMW gave us everything else. We can't have everything, I guess. They give us everything else we could have asked for in a car. It looks fantastic. Traction's fantastic. The handling's fantastic. The interior is great. It gets reasonable gas mileage, which I guess is cool. And the one sort of flaw the problem is the most important to me is the exhaust sound, and that's something that's just real disappointing. But AWE does the best, I think, at making it sound as good as possible, which is great. I mean, this is their first exhaust in the BMW world, and it's fantastic. Zero drone, like not even a hint. I couldn't give you a hint of drone if I wanted to, even with a non-resonated exhaust. It's pretty fantastic and super comfortable, but it does make some noise when I want it to. It's just questionable whether that noise is something I want it to sound like or not. So I have the diamond black 90 millimeter tips versus you can get 100 millimeter. I don't like giant tips. I like them to be subtle. I have them tucked in as far as they'll go, symmetrically with the sort of the fender almost sort of flush, kind of like flush with the wheels and tires. I want to have the same sort of flush look. So that's my thought process on exhaust. One of my other favorite mods in the car is the Rkp Front Lip. My thought process there is a little different than most. I don't like leaf residue. I don't like the capped off carbon fiber, whatever they're called, splitters, or front strakes, or whatever the heck they call those things. So from BMW M Performance, you can get the carbon covers, and then you can get their carbon reinforced, or their plastic front lip, which isn't quite as aggressive as this. And in order for it to work together, you need both, because the front lip is designed to work with the splitters. So it looks kind of odd if you just put the front lip on, which is all that I really wanted. So I think Rkp is IND. I think IND has somebody design, or it's their line, but they came out with a more aggressive version of the stock front lip in a carbon fiber version. Of course, the fear there is, last thing you want to do is hit this thing on the ground and mess it up. There's sort of expensive piece of carbon fiber, but I love the look of it. It's just aggressive enough, but very clean. Just sort of makes the front bumper, because the M3's front bumper is a little short looking in my opinion, just the way it's designed. So I think it just sort of adds a little bit of sort of heft with the front bumper, and really works well for me. So really expensive. I will cry my eyes out if I crack it or hit a curb, but again, I've been driving lowered cars since I started driving, or shortly after driving. So you just have to get used to it. It's about 3.5 inches off the ground. It's a little bit lower than my GT3, and I haven't hit it yet. I haven't scraped anywhere yet. So I think it's going to be fine, and I would highly recommend it. I had PSI install that for me. Again, I was on a little kick there for a little while where I wasn't DIYing everything. Certain things I've learned where my expertise is worth the time, and then other times where it's better to have somebody else do it. Eventually, if I do this garage condo and I get a lift, I'm sure I'll do pretty much everything myself, but that's one thing that I had them do. It's a pretty easy install, but you do have to drill the bumper, so I had them do it. David did a good job on it. So Rkp Front Lip, again, sort of that subtle carrying through the carbon fiber, a little bit of carbon fiber in the front lip, the roof, and then a little bit of carbon fiber on the Decklid spoiler, and then of course you could do the final bit of carbon fiber on the rear diffuser. I just chose not to do that. So last couple of mods, and this is the one that I just did most recently, is the AWE intake. And I knew the intake really wouldn't do much for this car. Honestly, at least the interior, it doesn't sound any different than the factory. It's, the piping's a little bit thicker, and I guess the box is maybe a little bit bigger than factory, but it doesn't sound any different to me. I just like it. It matches the carbon fiber here really well, and intakes are just a fun little project for me, and I always get my money back, or a large percentage of my money back from an intake if I do it. So despite the fact that it's expensive, it's one of those things that I just don't feel like, same thing with an exhaust on a car. I'm not going to lose my share. I might lose 50% of the value, but I'm going to get 20, 30, 50,000 miles out of it. So I really, really like this intake. I think it looks fantastic. Maybe it sounds a little different. I need to go out and I just realized something I didn't do right. I need to fix that. The carbon brace holds this in. I didn't realize that. That's a bonehead move by me. I'm going to fix that here in a second. Now, I apologize to AWE for saying that this thing just floats. Well, the reason why it was floating is I didn't connect it to the carbon fiber strut brakes. So, intake, it's cool. More bling than anything. Probably doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of power difference. Maybe a few, 5, 10 horsepower at the peak. Looks like it's hitting the hood there a little bit, but I think it's cool. The last mod that I have done is probably the most important for this car. Is the Dynan ECU upgrade, or the Dynan tune. Let me mess with the ISO here a little bit. ISO. So the Dynan box goes here. I had it done at Reeves Motorsport down in Tampa, and now I have stage 2. So I started out with stage 1 and then went to stage 2 with a firmware update. And here's my my thought process on that. And forgive me, this is probably going to get me in trouble on the forum, but I have to be honest here. Warranty, no warranty, whatever. I mean, having a Dyna warranty, I guess, is cool, but I know that if there's a problem, that there'll probably be sort of a blame game, and I probably won't get anything out of it and have to pony up some cash. But piggyback versus flash, I mean, I don't really care as long as it works. Just make it work. One thing I don't want is I don't want to be driving around with a laptop adjusting different maps and adjusting different, and trying to data log and making sure that I'm running in the right air-fuel ratio combination and making sure I'm not running lean or rich or running too much PSI or whatever. I don't have that expertise. I know I could. I know it's not that hard, but I'm not going to do that. I don't like adjusting my suspension settings, so I'm not going to like adjusting my what my car is, how it's running. And so, Dynan to me was the first solution that was available. Obviously very expensive. I'm a huge fan of Dynan. I like the fact that they have probably the best facilities in the automotive world. I understand the fact that takes them, it costs them more to do that, to have that staff, to have the building, to have all this stuff. I understand that it's expensive to do that, and I understand they're going to have to charge a premium for their product. And me personally, I'd rather keep my money, but I feel like if we want companies to continue to develop and evolve and stand behind their product, then you have to pay them. I mean, you have to pay AWE for their stuff. I want to get everything for free, and it's all about me, but you know, you have to pay for quality, and if you want the company to be successful and come out with more stuff, then you have to support them. And so, and I know I'll get flamed for this, but I'm just not interested in buying a product from a company that is banned from the forum, and I don't know anything about it. And I understand they have a great reputation on, you know, from the 335 and great track record and the whole thing. It's just something about it just didn't work well for me. And I wanted something conservative, which I know you could do with JB4 or BMS Tune. But it just seems really odd to me that the guy that creates the product isn't even allowed on the forum. And the fact that I couldn't figure out what N54 was in BMS, I get it now, I understand. And I'm a little tired of people flaming me for choosing, you know, Dynan. They're calling me an idiot, you know, thinking that I don't know what I'm doing. There's a very specific reason why I chose this. One, it was the first or second tune available, and two, I knew that it would work and I wouldn't have to freaking worry about it. And that's all I cared about. What I'm probably going to do, so I did Dynan Stage 1. Stage 2 is much more linear. You don't get nearly as much sort of delayed response, delayed throttle response, or I call it turbo lag, but everybody tells me there's no turbo lag in this car, which I think is BS. But you know, I probably will do, if ESS does come out with the ability for us to flash tune the car via the OBD2 port, not have to pull the ECU out and send it in. I will probably do that simply because they were able to tune out the overrun or the fart. And the fart bothers me enough that I'll probably do that. It makes considerably more power. I understand the virtues of having a flash tune versus a piggyback. So I might, I guess I could sell my Dynan Stage 2. I don't know. I mean, it just plugs right into the car, so I would think I guess I could. Maybe you wouldn't get the same warranty because it's secondhand. I'm not sure how that works, but you know, I know I spent, you know, what, $2,750 into the Dynan tune. The ESS is what, $1,200-1,300, so maybe I could sell it at 50% off or something like that. I really do like the Dynan Stage 2. I probably shouldn't mess with it. I probably should just leave it alone. I know the car's not making as much horsepower, but the thing is already hard enough to keep on the road as it is. I like it. I think it changes the way the turbos sound. You know, you can hear the, you know, the boost difference, the profile difference of the engine. You can feel the difference in power. I understand I can make more. I know I can make more, but I don't want to. I just don't want to have a problem. And if I do, I want at least some chance of, you know, the dealership has a really good relationship with Dynan. And Dynan has a good relationship with them, so I think that I believe that they'll stand behind the tune and the product. So that's just my thought process on it and why I've chosen it. And I don't hate on other companies. It may sound like I am. I just have to go with my gut, and my gut tells me that, you know, Dynan is the way to go and ESS is the way to go. It's just my opinion. There's very little fact behind that opinion, but that's why I chose this. And the funny thing is the guys that are the most vocal about JB4 are the ones that don't freaking have an M3, or if they do, they don't tell anybody they do, or they pretend like they do, and they you know, sort of condescending that how could you not? It's so easy to drive around with a freaking laptop on your front seat. And I understand you could just do map 1 or 7 or whatever it is, 6, and just leave it alone, but I'm not going to get E85 and put a meth kit in the car. I just don't care. I'm not racing anybody. I just want it to work. I want to get solid performance out of the car, and if I can spend a few $1,000 and get more out of it and enjoy it more, then I'm all for that. But I'm just honestly, personally not particularly interested in going to those crazy levels. It's just not my bag. I'm wound too tightly to be worrying about it all the time, and I'm also not interested in committing fraud and lying to the dealership and pulling things off the car and trying to keep a straight face when they ask me if I tuned it. So that's my thought process behind the mods. Really, the only other mod I have planned are the wheels at some point if Frank ever figures them out. So I think the car is pretty well set up. I don't really plan to do anything in the interior. I don't plan to do anything with downpipes or anything like that. So the only thing I may do is, again, the ESS flash tune if it's reliable and stable, and if they can't do it through the OBD2 port, then I'll just leave the dyno stage 2 intact. So I'm going to fix this thing that I messed up here, and the coolant tank, I just need to put the bolt in the proper way. And you know, that's my thought process, and you may agree or disagree with it, but I figured, you know, that'd be interesting to some of you who like M3s on why I set it up the way I did, and what my thought process is for the future. Thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for more stuff.